Welcome back to the podcast. Let's talk about decompensation on a physical and an emotional level. Now, this has come up because I'm in the midst of a live support round on my release course. Release is where people come to learn how to process their emotions, decipher the message behind their experience, and a lot of the time people come in with chronic illness or complex health conditions. But there are also people that aren't affected on a health level, and they just recognize that they are experiencing these repeated patterns in their life, and they recognize that processing their emotions can probably help them move forwards. And so this topic of decompensation came up because of the energy of the group, the questions they're asking, the experiences that they're going through, and what I am observing. It's different every time. And I love telling stories to help people understand how and why they feel the way they do. So I'm going to use the physical to explain what happens on an emotional level. But what I'll start with is my little spiel about emotions and how the body compensates. And that's that we move through life and we have life experiences. We have highs, we have lows. And for some of you, for some of us, we experience trauma in our life. Now, all of these experiences are associated with emotions that want to be felt, expressed, processed, discharged at the time or very soon after an event. There's usually two reasons why we don't process our emotions. The first one is we don't know how, it wasn't modeled to us. And the second reason is that in busy Western society, we often don't give ourselves space and time. We say, oh, we'll do it later. And then it actually becomes more difficult to experience and process those emotions. And so what happens is if you store these emotions, I say they get stored as a source of stress. And we know that everyone has a different capacity to be able to manage stress because the body compensates. Everyone's got a different threshold. So your body continues to compensate for these stored emotions. And usually when it's compensating, you don't actually notice many ill effects. Okay. Your body's doing its job for you. But then eventually your emotional cup starts to fill up and it reaches a point where it can't store any more emotions. It overflows. And that overflow becomes the undesirable manifestations on a physical, mental, behavioral, energetic, spiritual level. Just the stuff that you would rather not feel symptomatically in your life, in all facets of life. Okay, so compensation is amazing because you usually don't notice ill effects until your body can't handle it anymore. So I just want to give you that groundwork, those foundations to understand what is compensation in the way that I'm describing it on an emotional level. Now, on a physical level, our body can also do that we tweak something in our body and the body tightens up. It gives us some muscle protection. And maybe you notice a little bit, but it's not painful. It protects that area and it tells you, hey, don't move into this too much. Otherwise, I will give you pain. Okay. So sometimes we notice it or we don't notice it, or it's not major because the body is compensating and doing its job. Now, if we keep on ignoring it and we keep on aggravating that little injury, then the body starts to get tighter. It has to compensate because you keep on asking it to do the thing that it doesn't want to do. Now, decompensation was such a familiar word for me in the osteo world. And so if we think of it in really basic terms, that someone has an injury and they have got tension in their body, they've got muscle protection, they have maybe stiff joints around the area. It can be really, the mindset can be, oh, I'm going to get in there and fix it as an osteopath. I'm going to get in there and loosen off all of the muscles and I'm going to release the joints. I'm going to dry needle the muscles, deep tissue massage it until it relaxes off. And I'm going to go in and crack the joints to get that area moving better. Now, that can work for some people, but I know that when I was practicing as an osteopath, people would come in with very similar type presentations, but everyone handled the treatments differently. It was all very nuanced. And so if you get in there and you let go of too much of the muscle tension, you get the joints to release, you can actually cause a decompensation kind of cascade of events where you let go of too much of the compensation and the body unravels and it really exposes what it was protecting. So it's not always a good thing to get in there and unwind what the body has done. And so I used to say to people, you're coming in for half an hour, maybe once a week. There are so many other hours in a day and in between your treatments where you may be required to move differently, to do a few rehab exercises so that your body can unwind and know what is safe, what is normal for it once again. So it may mean that using this example, okay, we do a little bit of soft tissue stuff, but maybe we don't crack the joints this first week because that would be too much for the body. Let's just loosen it off a little bit, but you need to change a few things in the way you move, or maybe you need to introduce a few gentle exercises or stretches so that you set yourself up better for the next session and we can unwind it a little bit more. So it's not just like get in, fix it, unwind everything, and you're all good to go. I probably think of two people out of the thousands of people that I treated over the years as an osteopath, where it was just like, all right, all I had to do was crack you and massage this and needle it, and you were good after a couple of sessions. I can only recall two people's bodies like that. I still remember what they look like. Okay, so you are required to do a little bit of work, particularly if you have had a long-standing issue. I know it would be great if someone could just get in there, unwind it for you. Sometimes we have this sense of what our body needs. And I'm sure that some of you have also paid the price where too much getting in there actually made you feel worse and set you back. Okay. And this is going to tie into the emotional side of things. So I want to share a couple of other stories of experiences that I have had, and I will usually share this because I have seen this pattern play out over and over again. Okay. So I remember treating someone who had low back, mid back issues. And it was so satisfying to treat. Definitely got a good release in the muscles using needles and soft tissue work, and would always get a really satisfying crack through the thoracolumbar region, so that mid to lower back area. And then what was really interesting is after a few sessions, it became apparent that this mid to lower back issue that was presenting as tightness and stiffness was actually compensating for something going on in the hip region. And so I think it was after a few sessions, I can't remember exactly how many, that the body didn't release in that satisfying way like it did once before, and a new problem had popped up. And so there was some nerve stuff going on down their leg, and it was presenting as kind of like numbness and a cold feeling. And so that then opened up the pathway to them getting it investigated and found that there was something sitting in the hip region that was causing this nerve impingement. Okay, so I'm not going to go into details about what it is because what I realize after all these years of treating and working with people is that one person can have a condition, but it presents in many different ways. It affects everyone in a very unique way. So basically, what I was seeing is that they came in for mid to lower back discomfort, stiffness, tightness in the muscles. I wouldn't say it was incredibly painful for them, but enough for them to want to do something about it. And then as we unwound what the body was compensating for, it revealed where the root on a physical level was, which was the problem was in the hip. And so the body was doing an amazing job of actually protecting that hip area. because as I unwound it, actually the hip kind of, I guess, destabilized, and the issue that was going on in the hip had maybe reached a point over a period of years where it was just big enough to start to impinge on the nerve and cause those weird sensations, which then led to the next pathway. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing because that enabled that person to then go, okay, what do I need to do to help this and explore other options? And they ended up having surgery, and that meant that they were able to function better on a physical level, day-to-day work. It's not that great having numbness and a cold feeling in your thigh. It's something that I've actually experienced in early pregnancy. And they were able to go on and create amazing things in their life. Okay. So that's one story on a physical level. Now, I've got one that ties in with physical and emotional. And you may have seen this on my social media under Instagram. I talked about a true story of someone coming in to see me with hip dysfunction. And when they found out what it was compensating or what it was covering on an emotional level, they actually wanted their hip pain or their hip dysfunction back. Okay. So this is a story. It was an older guy, retired, loving life, riding his bike, and the hip wasn't painful, but what would happen is they would ride for many, many kilometers, stop for a coffee break, and then actually, when he tried to get back onto his bike, he would have to step over it and lift it up. He couldn't just swing his leg over. So it wasn't painful, but he just couldn't do it. And if anything, it seemed like it was more embarrassing that, he wasn't as mobile as he wanted it to be. And it just didn't really make sense. And so, as an osteo, you're taught to be holistic and look at the whole body, and you're meant to look at the emotional state as well. But I definitely looked at the whole body. And there were a few things that's like, I can't feel anything going on in this hip joint that would make sense of this. And like, it didn't seem like it was osteoarthritis or anything like that, because you can feel the hip range of motion deteriorating if there are signs of osteoarthritis, and it happens in a particular pattern for a lot of people. And so, again, treated the hip a few times. And thankfully, this person actually persisted and didn't say this didn't work the first time. They actually came back a few times. It's like, right, nothing is changing, but all of your symptoms, experiences are in your hip. We're looking in the wrong place. So I would usually have said to people, now I don't treat people anymore as an osteopath, but this is something to keep in mind if you are going and seeing someone for chronic issues, is give them 3 to 5 treatments, because sometimes it's in the treatment results that it opens the next answer, the next doorway for you. Okay. If you keep on jumping from practitioner to practitioner, then you're not really helping yourself. You're wasting your time, you're wasting your money. Okay. So after a few sessions, I was like, right, we need to look somewhere else in the body. Let's go up, let's go down. And I found a lot of tension in the calf muscles. Now, I have seen this happen in other areas of the body, right? I'm not just saying that the calf is going to hold this emotion, this emotional state that I'm going to share with you, that this is just a particular story to share that how your body compensates, how it shows up physical stuff for emotional issues. And so what was really interesting is as I got down to the calves, I was like, oh, there's something here. You're kind of flinching. Can I get into this? Can I find a way to get into this? And he shared with me that no one has ever touched my calves. Well, there's been one person, but I don't let anyone touch my calves. So, well, that's interesting. Maybe sometimes the places we don't want to go is actually where we need to grow, grow on the physical level, grow on a personal level. I think you've all heard that saying before. The things that we resist are sometimes the things that are going to be the result of our greatest growth. So I did end up treating the calves, and I noticed some interesting responses after the treatment that I was like, oh, I'm used to people when they get needled that their nervous system can be a little bit all over the shop and they feel tired or they feel anxious or they just don't feel quite right. And so I say, you've got to give yourself space and time to recover after this. Anyway, I noticed that something wasn't quite right. But anyway, they came back And amazing. Went for a bike ride on the weekend, rode kilometers, had the coffee break, was able to swing their hip back over their bike. I was like, amazing. We're onto it. Let's keep on treating this area. But Jen, anxiety has come back. You've fixed this one issue that I came in for, and now my anxiety has come back. And I believe they went to the doctor and they got Valium because it was too much to deal with. And I think this is what happens a lot with people with their emotions. And anxiety was something very familiar to them. They had been here before, but decades prior, and it hadn't been processed through that experience. And so that hip dysfunction, because it wasn't pain, it was just dysfunction, they couldn't swing their leg over the bike after kilometers of riding, was covering up tension that was in the calves. Releasing the calves helped the hip, but then it opened up the next thing. And so the body decompensated what it was compensating for. It was compensating for the anxiety. And for some reason, this person stored it in their calves and then it moved on to the hip. And who knows where it would have moved on to next. And so sometimes you chip away and you expose these layers. And so I just so clearly remember so many stories like this, so clearly remember them saying to me, I want my hip dysfunction back. I don't want to deal with this anxiety. And sometimes that is the path that people want to go on. They know what is going to help them, but they're not ready to move through that level of discomfort. Okay, so these are a few stories, a very generalized one where I talked about just people having stiffness, restricted joints, muscle tension. And then I shared about the person that I saw with mid to lower back stiffness and tension, but actually it was revealing something in the hip. And then this last story was someone who came in with hip dysfunction, not being able to have the range of motion they wanted, but actually when we looked in other areas of the body to release the hip, it revealed an emotional state of anxiety that was too much. And so then I come back to, we have these emotions, we have these experiences in life that are associated with emotions, and we store them in our body because our body doesn't, or we don't know how to express and process and discharge. Or the second reason is that we don't give ourselves time and space. And that is also what happens when we work on our emotional body. Okay. So these stories were to help create the foundation for how our emotional body compensates. Is that it can be very tempting to get in there and go hell for leather and go for the biggest, nastiest stuff, events, memories, interactions that feel highly traumatic. And you think and you have an expectation that if I process this, then I'm going to feel better. Then I'm going to be able to move forwards. And again, just like getting in there, dry needling, deep tissue massaging, cracking someone's back on the first go, that can work really well for some personalities, some constitutions. And we also have to take into account personality and constitution when it comes to emotional work. You've also got to honor how long have you been storing this in your body? What is your capacity to be able to handle the unwinding? Because for some people, they like to really feel the impact. They don't mind the discomfort that comes from doing emotional work. And there are other people that they've just got to go very, very gently and they've got to build their capacity. Now, I say that emotional processing also helps build your capacity, but it's very nuanced. Again, what are the things that you can do in between sessions so that you can go into these deeper layers and really trust your body and open yourself up to the unknown? Because I can sometimes have an idea of what releases, processing of your emotions can bring up. But with this, I also have seen, just like working with many different conditions as an osteopath, is that everyone is going to go on their unique journey. So the reason I shared this with the release group is because you can have this happen on a physical level, but also for those who don't experience physical issues, you can also have a decompensation on an emotional level. And for some people, it can be a good thing. For others, it can be quite confronting when the body starts to unravel, when the emotional body starts to unravel. And I feel like I'm going to talk about this in different ways across different podcast episodes to help you understand and to meet you where you're at. Okay, so this is the story of decompensation on a physical and also on an emotional level, and both can happen at the same time, as I have shared with you today through the stories. It's not something to be afraid of. You're going to know whether or not you're ready to move through that. And I'm just a huge advocate when you go on your physical or your emotional journey and hopefully combining physical and emotional together. I'm a huge advocate for having support because sometimes it can feel scary not knowing what is going on with your physical body or your emotional state. When you start to work on yourself at a deeper level, when you start to work on yourself at the root level, which is the emotions, and when you start processing your emotions. So let me know how this episode lands for you. You can feel free to message me. My Instagram, The Art of Listening to Your Body, is the best way to get in touch, or please feel free to email me back. I love to receive feedback so that I'm continuing to share content with you that is really helpful for you, that helps you feel safer to go into your emotional body, to help you process your past, because ultimately it is about opening yourself up to the present and the future that you can create. And if you love the way that I talk about emotional processing, you're keen to learn my process, the release process, then come and join me on my signature course, Release. I will pop the link in the show notes and you can go and explore. I say that a lot of the time my work draws people in by a feeling. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I would love to see you on Release someday. Thanks for listening.